was here on UK soil, would you be prepared to fight for your country? GB News' Patrick Christys has had this to say.
I don't think the younger generation would fight for this country. I think they're too woke. I think they've had their heads filled with a load of lefty tot about how patriotism is a bad thing, borders shouldn't exist, and how we're a horrible little racist island that needs to take the knee and repent for the sins of our forefathers.
So that's Patrick's view. He didn't mince his words at all, but do you agree? So for the Great British Debate, I'm asking, would you be prepared to fight for your country? Well, I'm joined by Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley. He's a retired British Army officer and a military historian. Jonathan, really good to see you, first of all. Let's just have a quick...
Thanks for asking me on.
That was great. So it's really good to talk to you. So let's have a quick look at sort of previous world wars and national service. Did it actually happen in those world wars? And if so, was it a good thing?
Well, people forget that we've got a very long tradition of compulsory military service in Britain. Yeah, we had it in the two world wars, but from Anglo-Saxon times to Victorian times, there was a ballot, and if your name came up, you had to join the militia, and you were liable for compulsory service, and it was part of life. That then went away, and during the two world wars, yes, we had to have conscription. It came in 1916 after the great wave of volunteering. In 1914 had begun to slacken off, and then we had it again from 1939 onwards, and it carried on right the way through. I can well remember it when my father was still in the army in 1962, and I can well recall, even as a young lad at school, being told, "Oh yes, your compulsory military service will come up, lad." Not that it bothered me, because I intended to join up anyway. And we had to have it in those days, and it was possible to have it, principally because the preparation time for a soldier, particularly a soldier, less so for a sailor and an airman in the two world wars, was manageable. Nowadays, the problem with compulsory military service, of course, is that equipment is so complex that the training time is very long, and you have to have people in for quite a while to make them useful, and then that takes them away from the workforce and all sorts of other areas of economic activity.
But they could learn, couldn't they? I mean, like if people were conscripted, then you'd send your first consignment out whilst you were training the others. That shouldn't really. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that should be a barrier. Could you ever see that actually being replicated now, though? So people being conscripted, do you think that is a potential? And also, do you think that young people would be prepared to do it, or do you think they'll come up with some sort of woke reason, as in my human rights?
Let's deal with the second point first. And I heard your previous commentator rubbishing the younger generation. I don't agree with him. You go to any cadet centre in Britain, whether it's Navy or Marines or Army or Air Force, and you'll find a lot of well-motivated, decent, patriotic young men and women, boys and girls, who are there, who've made a commitment to their country. Go and pay a call on Hugh Lewis's terrific Military Preparation College Trust. It prepares youngsters for military service and for joining the emergency services, but many of them don't go on to that. They just go back into society as better citizens. I don't think, despite all the wokeness, and yeah, I see it every day, despite all that, I think there's still a pretty good number, many thousands of decent young folk who think their country's worth fighting for.
Do you think that we should have national service, though? So, because from what you said, it will take time to train people and things like that. Do you think that we should have a compulsory sort of national service that people will be forced to do for a short period of time? And if so, do you think that would be useful in this current environment?
Well, it's something that I frequently wrestle with. In principle, why should people not do something for their country, even if it's Meals on Wheels or shoveling elephant poo at the zoo? And you could wrap military.
The different extreme, but yes.
But yeah,
Well, how did that
as a
flash in your
principle, do
mind?
something. Yeah, focus on something else. Um,
I don't know.
but yeah, principle, national service, small n, small s. Why not?
Yeah.
In America, they have the Peace Corps. It's not compulsory. Actually, in the States, you still have to register for the draft. Although people are not being called up, you're still liable. You may still be liable. And of course, many European countries kept the draft for a long time, not because they particularly needed or wanted the manpower, but because it was about forming the nation. It was about this idea of contribute something to your country. So in principle, do I think it's a good idea? Yes. In practical terms, is it possible? I'm really not sure. Because of the costs and the technicalities. One of the reasons we went away from compulsory service in the 60s was that it was just unaffordable, and the Navy and the Air Force certainly didn't want it.
Well, these are. I can hear how it would be kind of a tricky thing to do nowadays, but it would be. I think it might be a good thing for discipline as well. Now, some people would say that we're a long way away from another world war. I don't necessarily think that's the case. If they asked you to fight, and I can see that you are definitely within the parameters of between 18 to 60, would you be prepared to fight if they told you to go? And would you be prepared to do that?
I joined up when I was 16. I spent 40 years in uniform. And more than half of that on active service in the face of the enemy, and so I've already done so. And if I'm required to do so again, yeah, I'll get my gas mask. I'll get my gas mask out and get on parade.
Wow, you kept that from then. It probably won't work now, but anyway, it's really good to talk to you, Lieutenant. It's lovely to talk to you. That's Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley. He's a retired British Army officer and military historian. So would you be prepared to fight for your country if you were asked to do so? It is the Great British Debate this hour, and that's the question that I'm asking. Let's take a look at what you've been saying already. Tanya says, depends on who I'm fighting and why. Ask the Russians. There are plenty who don't want to fight. Tom says, I don't know about overseas, but if our country was invaded, I would want to help in any way. And Jack says, I'd only fight if the Tories were in power. I don't think I would if Labour were in. Really? Why not? It's still the same country. If they asked me to fight for a bit for my country, I'd want to go. And I know that I'm a little bit shallow in the sense of it, but I see myself in the outfit, the sort of, I have the Facebook paints on, I'll have the combats and everything. I'll have like the bullets going across with the gun on my back. I mean, look,
What to do the
Rambo, Nambo.
Sigmund Freud would have been fascinated with that elephant dung. Where did that come from? I've got to pull you up. Lieutenant General. Lieutenant is American.
All right. You can push me off on it. You could put...
I'm still thinking about Nambo.
Nambo. Yes, she will fight for your country.
Do you know, it's a really interesting tweet that you had from one of your viewers who said, look at Russia. So obviously they're getting conscripted to go and fight in Ukraine. And a lot of them, I mean, if we were in the same position and felt that it was unfair war, what would you be thinking? But equally, it all depends on the circumstances. I know in France, so Emmanuel Macron in 2018 announced that he was going to have reintroduced national conscription. That changed in 2019 to civil service. But one of the things they were talking about, it's that patriotism, it's bringing all parts of the society together. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. We talk about health of youngsters as well, getting their fitness up. Good.
And discipline. Yeah. I think it was. But then they'll probably find some sort of reason as to why they shouldn't do it. It'll be like, oh, well, it's against my human rights, or there'll be some other reason. Do you think?
No. If Russia is invading, they have no choice but to fight.
Would you be prepared to fight for your country? Now, thousands of Ukrainians have stayed behind to volunteer and fight for their country as Russia invades their homeland. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told Ukrainians that they have withstood the blow of Russia's invasion as he urged citizens to continue fighting. But I'm asking, if the fight was on UK soil, should we go back to a World War model of national service? Or is that outdated? And would you be prepared to fight for your country? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly and writer and actor Yanis Morgan. So, yeah, you heard what the lieutenant said.
Lieutenant, yeah.
Lieutenant General.
Oh, for
You just
goodness
demoted him about
Oh, for goodness sake.
10 down the hierarchical structure.
Is it now? Is it now, Danny? Thank you for that. Right, so let's start with you, Yanis. So would you be prepared to fight yourself, personally?
Yes, and we talked about this, depending, the tweet had from your guest saying if you felt it was a just war. But an interesting point that the Lieutenant General said, and this is a really good one, the reason why it was phased out is the drain the draft was having. So the practicalities, I think, would be an issue. But on principle, I think national service would be a very good thing. And if we were confronted with someone invading our country, I do think everyone would step up. You'd step up, don't you?
Yeah, I would do it. And to go back to Patrick's monologue, I think it was a load of garbage. And I think it was unfair on a whole generation of people. Don't forget, it's not whether you want to join the army. We're talking about Russia invading this country. Now, you can be as woke as you want. And you can do whatever you want. You could be a hard lefter, complete liberal. But if Russian troops are coming down, in my case, Coventry or Birmingham High Street, it doesn't matter about your political persuasion or how you feel about geopolitics. You need to pick up a rifle.
Yeah, but maybe, but I've spoken to a lot of young people who say they simply wouldn't do it. They don't think it's, there's a lot of people wouldn't actually want to do that, and they wouldn't be prepared to do it in national service. Some would say that it's completely wrong. I
think until you're presented with the situation. So in principle now we're talking about it, and let's hope we are never faced with that. But like you say, if you've got another nation invading, I think people's views would change. If your family's at risk, and especially being a parent now, if I knew I was protecting my family, I absolutely would.
I think you're so right, because we're confusing two things here. National service would be maybe after this, hopefully not this war. We're talking about almost a militia. There are two separate things here. National service is something that youngsters may indeed be going on in the future, but we're now talking about defending our country against hostile forces.
Yeah, but
they're different.
So, well, let's let's answer the question then with regard to national service. Then, do you think that we should bring back national service?
I think it has a lot of merits. And we talked about France's model and what they're doing. It's now a civil service, but what it's doing is bringing lots of different parts of our society together in a common goal, which is a good thing. It will teach them discipline. Again, if you've got the younger members of our society doing that, great. Improving fitness. What are we all talking about for years and years, that we're getting more obese, we're not eating healthy,
Don't
exercise.
Look at Danny, that's not fair.
No, wasn't it?
You did.
Again, that was the smile. That was a Freudian smile. Yes, it was.
You did. You looked over to my beautiful panel.
Why'd you have to get the best-looking panellist on GBNews to sit next to me? How slim and muscular he is. What a juxtaposition this is.
And he's got hair.
And he's got loads of hair.
I can talk about wearing mine.
I mean, the countries where you have national service, Israel, obviously, because they're paranoid about their defence, and justifiably. France, do they have social issues in France? Do they have kids dropping litter in France? Is it a national service, what the Lieutenant General said?
It's a civil service in France. They've got a civil service. So it started off in 2018. Emmanuel Macron wanted to bring national service. That changed to civil service. So it's still led by the army, but they don't have weapons. They learn self-defence and first aid, and it's more patriotism.
And do you think they have less litter and less social problems?
Probably.
Do you think so?
I don't
know. I don't know about that, but I think that there's a place for it because there's a level of discipline. And right now, there is an unruly element, I think, in a lot of...
They're a lot slimmer.
Yeah, well.
And see, there you go.
They're a lot
Nobody
slimmer.
said anything, Danny. We weren't going to say anything. But yes, you make a very good point. And also, I think actually that is a good point. It's good for mental health in terms of physical fitness. It's good for discipline. I think national service should be brought back. I'm probably an old, sort of dying generation who think that, but I wonder what young people think. Let's find out, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome on our great British voice, the opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what you think about what we're discussing. Now, Oliver Hodgson is from the Lake District. He's 18, so I thought we'd ask a young person. Why not? Oliver, so would you be prepared to fight for your country?
I think, as your earlier guest said, the narrative that Gen Z aren't prepared to pick up a weapon and fight and protect their land is just not true. Actually, me personally, if there was a war going on my high street down the road, yes, absolutely, I would get involved and protect our country. And I think there is a real issue, actually, at the minute with how Gen Z and young people and my generation are being brushed down as this kind of generation who don't care, and they're not patriotic, and they deface statues, etc., etc. That isn't the reality. It was only a few years ago I was at school, and I went to school with people who have now gone on to, military college, are in the cadets, and all those kind of things. And it's fantastic. They're not given the airtime. And when I do speak to people like my grandfather, who's in his late 70s, and he kind of sees our generation as the one who, moan on breakfast television about, pronouns in bios on social media sites and such like, and all this kind of thing. And I think actually, no, that isn't our whole generation. Our generation is full of people who do care about the country, me being one of them. And I think that needs to be given more attention.
And briefly, what about national service then? Would you be up for that?
I think it depends on the circumstances, and I think, as I say, if there was something going on down the street or in this country, yes. If it's a war on, a different part of the world, I don't know. I would have to, I think it's a lot more consideration. But do I think it should be brought back? I think it depends on the circumstances. You can understand why, with what's going on at Russia and Ukraine, why these discussions are being had. But I think we have to be careful not to repeat history and see so many lives lost, and that we do have to have people fighting for the country who are trained to do so. But desperate times call for desperate measures, I suppose.
Well, Oliver, thank you very much for your thoughts, because we're talking about Generation Z, and there's one of them there, and that's what you think, and it's really good to hear what you think instead of us old hacks talking nonsense. Thank you so much, Oliver. That's Oliver Hodgson. He's a GB voice. Gen Z as well. Gen Zer.
Good guy.
So that's what he thinks. He said that they would be prepared. But he sort of didn't answer the question about national service, because he said it depends on the circumstances. Whereas I'm saying that actually it would be good to have that as a thing that would be done, that young people do. It gives them a sense of patriotism, a sense of belonging, also discipline, and all the other things that it brings.
Just very quickly, and something we haven't discussed. So when war broke out in Ukraine, there were actually a lot of British citizens who were going out to fight, and they felt that it was their obligation. They said they wanted to do something. They saw the injustice. So there are sections of our society who would be prepared to stand up. But I thought it was a great interview with Oliver. Good guy.
Oh.
What a terrific opinion, and what a great public speaker, almost. A great,
18
fabulous.
years old.
I know. I'm from one of the nicest counties in the UK, Cumbria. Beautiful. And there you go, just again rubbishing what Patrick had to say, the sweeping generalisation of young woke people.
Well, I'd love to see Patrick have a conversation with him, actually. We might try and get him up, and he can actually be on Patrick's show and talk to Patrick about what Patrick said.
Yeah,
because, but in a way, I mean, I'm one who sort of slightly goes along with what Patrick is saying, because I think there is an energy with many young people who don't want to get their hands dirty, get involved in all of that, and there's a lot of...
I would argue that they are in a tiny minority. That
well,
would be my point, but they're the loudest. That's the problem. They're the loudest.
Well,
it would change if we were in the same situation as Ukraine. I know we already said this, but if there were tanks going down your high street, I think it would then energise a lot of people to get out there and protect that.
I can see that as well, actually.
That's right.
I can see that as well, but alongside that argument, and from what I heard from our historian and ex-lieutenant, I would say that... Oh, for goodness sake.
In a general.
I would say that I've forgotten what I was going to say now.
Sorry.
Well done, thank you. No. But I would say that actually we should bring back national service, because, as he said, he pointed out, it takes months to learn the equipment.